A tourist went missing in the Oregon forest, and 1 year later, they found him inside the trunk of a hollow tree. The discovery left the entire town in silence. No one could comprehend how a healthy, experienced outdoorsman could vanish in broad daylight, only to be found in a place no one would ever think to look. His name was Michael Turner, 34, from Portland. He was a biologist, specializing in the study of plants and fungi in the damp forests of the Pacific Northwest. For Michael, the forest wasn't just his workplace. It was a living world, breathing and full of secrets. On the day he disappeared, the weather was mild and clear. He told his wife he'd only need a few hours to collect fungus samples around Silver Creek Trail, a secluded area known for its fog and towering old-growth trees. But when night fell, his phone lost signal, the GPS stopped transmitting, and he never called back. 3 days later, searchers found Michael's pickup truck parked neatly by the trailhead, keys still in the ignition. His small backpack and field recorder were missing. Police launched a large-scale search, with dogs, helicopters, and dozens of volunteers combing the woods for days. But it all ended in silence. A year passed. Then, during a spring field survey, a group of forestry students from Oregon State University stumbled upon a massive hollow tree, its trunk split open long ago by lightning. Inside, they found what was left of Michael Turner, seated upright, his back against the wood, arms folded over his chest as if he had tried to hold on to something before time finally stopped. No one knew how he got inside. There were no signs of struggle, no visible injuries. Only a small audio recorder lying near his feet, still intact, capturing faint sounds of wind, dripping water, and then Michael's voice, quiet and uncertain. I hear someone calling my name. Michael Turner had always been drawn to silence, not the kind found in empty rooms, but the silence that lives deep within the forest, where every sound seems to breathe. He grew up in Portland but spent most of his weekends hiking through the moss-covered trails of Oregon, fascinated by the quiet world beneath the canopy. Friends used to joke that the woods knew him by name. He worked as a biologist for a local environmental institute, studying the relationship between fungi and decaying trees. His research wasn't glamorous, but Michael loved it. He often said the forest told stories most people never noticed in the way a fungus blooms after rainfall, or how a fallen branch nurtures new life. He was the kind of man who found beauty in small, overlooked things. In early September 2022, Michael was preparing for a short field trip to Silver Creek Trail, a remote section of forest about 2 hours from Portland. He'd been there once before, years earlier, but wanted to return to document how the ecosystem had changed after a major storm. It was supposed to be a simple, one-day trip. His wife Anna remembered how calm he was that morning. He packed light a field recorder, a notebook, a sample bag, and his camera. Before leaving, he kissed her on the forehead and said, "I'll be back by dinner." Those were the last words she ever heard from him. Silver Creek Trail had a reputation among locals. It wasn't dangerous, but people said strange things happened there. Compasses spinning wildly, radios cutting out, sudden drops in temperature. Michael didn't believe in superstition, yet he noted those details in his field journal anyway. He believed every legend came from something real, even if science hadn't explained it yet. When he arrived, the sky was pale gray, and mist hung low between the trees. The forest floor was soft with fallen needles, and the air smelled of wet earth. He began walking deeper into the woods, recording samples of lichen and spores, his voice occasionally captured on the recorder describing each finding. Around midday, the last confirmed timestamp on his GPS showed him near the old logging route, a place rarely visited because most maps didn't even list it anymore. A nearby hiker later reported seeing a man matching Michael's description that same afternoon. He said the man was kneeling beside a fallen tree, appearing to study something in the dirt. When the hiker called out, Michael waved politely and said something about following the growth pattern, then disappeared behind a slope. That was the last verified sighting. By evening, Anna tried calling his phone, no answer. She assumed he'd lost signal. But when midnight came, and he still hadn't returned. She drove toward Silver Creek herself. She found his truck exactly where he'd left it. Inside were an extra jacket, a thermos of coffee still warm, and his favorite hiking map folded neatly on the seat. Nothing seemed wrong, yet something felt deeply off, as if the forest itself had quietly taken him in. The search for Michael Turner began at dawn the next morning, when local authorities arrived at Silver Creek Trail after Anna reported him missing. A thin layer of fog still clung to the trees, blurring the outlines of everything it touched. His truck was exactly as she'd described, parked neatly beside the gravel road, doors locked, no sign of struggle or disturbance. Sheriff Daniels led the first search team. They began by retracing Michael's intended route, following his notes and map coordinates found at home. The trail was steep in places, narrowing into damp passages of ferns and moss. Search dogs picked up his scent near the first-mile marker, but quickly lost it beyond the creek. The dense canopy overhead made it nearly impossible for drones or thermal cameras to detect anything through the layers of leaves. For days, volunteers combed the area, forest rangers, hikers, even strangers who had read about the case online. They shouted his name until their voices cracked, leaving the sound to fade into the endless rustle of branches. Each evening, the searchers gathered around campfires, discussing faint clues that led nowhere. A broken twig, an indentation in the mud, a thread of fabric too faded to identify. By the third day, they discovered a small clearing where it looked like someone had paused for rest. In the dirt, investigators found partial boot prints matching Michael's size. Nearby lay a sample jar and a pen, half buried under leaves. There was also a faint circular mark on the ground, possibly where he had placed his recording device or camera. But there were no further tracks leading away. It was as if he had simply stopped moving and vanished. One ranger mentioned a strange stillness in that spot, describing it as a silence that presses on you. Another said the birds wouldn't sing there, even though the rest of the forest buzzed with sound. They marked the area as significant, but found nothing more. When rain arrived on the fifth day, the search became even harder. Paths washed out. The creek overflowed. Dogs lost what little scent remained. A helicopter sweep covered 20 square miles with infrared equipment, yet not a single heat signature was found. The forest, it seemed, refused to give up its secret. Anna remained at the base camp the entire time. She sat by the fire every night, holding Michael's field journal, the one recovered from his office, reading through his last notes again and again. One entry caught her attention. Dated the day before he left, it read, "There's a section near Old Hollow Ridge I've wanted to explore. Locals say it feels different. I'll see for myself." Old Hollow Ridge lay several miles beyond the official trail boundary, a place marked as unsafe due to unstable ground and decaying old-growth trees. When rescuers finally ventured toward that region, the terrain became treacherous. Huge trunks had fallen across the path, their roots rising like walls. Beneath them were pits of soft earth and pockets of mist that clung stubbornly to the ground even under sunlight. By the 10th day, the operation was scaled back. Officially, the county declared it a missing person case with no conclusive evidence. Unofficially, many of the searchers admitted they were unsettled, not by exhaustion, but by the feeling that something in those woods was watching them. Anna refused to give up. She kept returning for months afterward, leaving messages on trees, marking places with ribbons, hoping he might somehow find his way back. But the forest stayed silent, unchanging, as if nothing had ever happened there at all. A full year passed before anyone mentioned Michael Turner's name again in the small towns around Mount Hood. The search had faded into memory, replaced by other stories and other faces. But for Anna, time never really moved forward. She still visited Silver Creek every month, parking at the same spot where his truck had been found, standing in silence as if listening for a sound she could never quite catch. Then, one morning in late September 2023, a call came from the Forestry Department at Oregon State University. A research group conducting ecological surveys deep inside the Silver Creek region had discovered something strange. They had been cataloging storm damage and hollow trees for habitat mapping when one of the students noticed a faint smell, something old, faintly metallic, carried by the wind from within a massive split tree trunk. The group thought it might be a trapped animal. When they approached, they found an opening in the bark large enough for a person to crawl through. The light from a headlamp revealed the unmistakable outline of human remains. The police arrived within hours. The scene was difficult to reach, nearly 2 miles from any known path, beyond the area originally searched the previous year. The tree was ancient, blackened by lightning decades ago, hollow through its center like a tunnel. Inside, the skeleton sat upright, back against the inner wall, legs bent slightly, hands resting on the chest, as though folded in peace. There were no signs of a struggle, no torn fabric, no indication of trauma. The soil beneath the body was undisturbed, as if he had entered willingly and never tried to escape. Next to the remains lay a small digital recorder and the rusted buckle of a backpack strap. Forensic teams worked for days to confirm the identity. Dental records and DNA matched perfectly. It was Michael Turner. The same man the entire community had searched for a year before, now found in the very forest that had swallowed him. Investigators were puzzled by one detail. The opening of the tree was narrow, barely wide enough for a grown man to squeeze through. The position of the body made it appear that Michael had crawled in on his own. But why? There were no signs of predators, no evidence of foul play. His clothing, though decayed, suggested he had been there for a long time, possibly since the very day he disappeared. When they examined the recorder, the team found it still intact, though heavily corroded. The last file, dated the same day as his disappearance, lasted for just over 4 minutes. It began with the sound of footsteps crunching through leaves, then Michael's voice describing samples and humidity levels. Midway through the recording, his tone changed. He whispered something about a hollow tree, followed by a pause. Then a faint echo, almost like another voice, murmured his name. After that came heavy breathing, the sound of wood creaking, and finally, his last words, barely audible through static. "It's darker in here than I thought, but I can still hear it, closer now." The rest was silence. When Anna received the news, she drove straight to the site, despite authorities warning her it was unsafe. Rangers guided her through the thick brush until she reached the enormous tree. She stood there for a long time, her hand pressed to the rough bark, whispering his name over and over. Later, investigators decided to leave the tree untouched, marking it as a protected site. They said disturbing it further might compromise evidence, though privately, many believed there was nothing left to learn. Yet some of those who were there that day said the forest felt different afterward. The air grew still, and for a brief moment, the wind stopped moving entirely. One ranger swore he heard a faint sound, a breath, or perhaps a whisper drifting out from the hollow trunk before everything went quiet again. In the weeks that followed Michael Turner's discovery, the investigation deepened, but the questions only multiplied. There was no conclusive explanation for what had happened in those woods, just fragments of evidence that seemed to point in every direction at once. To this day, the case remains one of Oregon's most unsettling mysteries, and over time, several theories emerged. None could be proven, yet each carried its own disturbing logic. The first and most widely accepted theory among investigators was accidental entrapment. According to this idea, Michael may have taken shelter inside the hollow tree during a sudden rainstorm or nightfall. Once inside, the slick walls and narrow entrance could have made it impossible for him to climb back out. The decayed wood might have shifted, sealing him within. It was a plausible story, tragic, but simple. Yet those who knew Michael best doubted it. He was cautious, methodical, and deeply familiar with natural hazards. Crawling into a confined, unstable space didn't fit his character. He respected the forest, Anna once said, but he never took reckless risks. Then came the psychological theory. Some speculated that isolation, exhaustion, or even a temporary mental break might have caused disorientation. Prolonged exposure to the forest's humidity and stillness can alter perception, sound carries strangely, shadows blur, and time seems to stretch. Perhaps Michael followed a sound or a feeling that wasn't real, believing he'd found something significant. There are recorded cases of experienced hikers who wandered off trail, convinced they were being led somewhere. If so, Michael may have entered the tree willingly, overcome by confusion or hallucination. But this explanation faltered too. The position of his body suggested calm, almost intention, not panic or delirium. A more chilling idea soon began circulating online. The forest called him. People in nearby towns have whispered about Silver Creek for decades. They speak of an old belief that some parts of the forest are alive in a way people don't understand. Locals call it the Whispering Hollow, a place where sounds echo strangely and travelers sometimes hear their names spoken when no one else is around. It's said that those who listen too closely never leave. The recording found beside Michael only fueled this theory. That faint voice repeating his name, was it an illusion or something else entirely? A retired ranger named Harold Keene shared an account that unsettled even the most skeptical officers. He claimed that years earlier, another man had vanished near the same ridge under similar circumstances. His gear was found beside a fallen log, and his notebook mentioned voices from inside the trees. The case was closed without resolution. Harold believed Michael stumbled into the same place, a spot where sound bends, where time doesn't behave as it should. Still others turned to scientific explanations. Some mycologist fungal researchers suggested that a combination of spores and carbon dioxide trapped inside a decaying trunk could induce dizziness and confusion. Inhaling certain molds for long periods can cause auditory hallucinations. Perhaps Michael was drawn by curiosity, entered the hollow, and became disoriented. The theory explained the voice on the recorder as a side effect of oxygen deprivation, a hallucination of his fading mind. It was rational but haunting in its own right. The final and least discussed theory came from Anna herself. In a letter she wrote months after the case closed, she suggested that maybe Michael hadn't been lost at all, at least not in the ordinary sense. He used to say, "The forest keeps what it understands," she wrote. "Maybe it knew him better than I ever did." To her, the idea wasn't about ghosts or madness. It was about belonging, that perhaps Michael, after years of studying the forest's hidden life, had in some strange way become part of it. Even now, hikers report strange sensations near the site. Some claim they've heard faint recordings echo through the trees, the soft click of a device turning on, or a whisper carried by the wind. Others avoid the area entirely, saying the forest feels heavier there, as though it remembers what happened. The official report lists the cause of death as undetermined environmental factors. But for those who've stood beneath that massive hollow tree, the question lingers. Did Michael Turner simply lose his way, or did the forest finally answer him back? Even after Michael Turner was found, the silence he left behind never truly lifted. The forest that had once echoed with his footsteps became a place no one wished to enter. Rangers avoided it at dusk, and hikers swore the air grew colder near that hollow tree. What happened to him remained a question that no science, no investigation could ever fully answer. Anna never stopped visiting. Each year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, she returned to Silver Creek Trail. She would walk the same path he once took, stopping near the old ridge where his final recording was made. Sometimes she spoke aloud to him, not expecting an answer, just needing her voice to fill the emptiness. "You love this place," she once whispered, tracing the bark of a nearby tree. "I hope it was gentle with you." Locals built a small wooden marker at the edge of the clearing, carved simply with his name and the words, "He listened to the forest." Over time, moss grew over the letters, as if the forest itself was reclaiming the memory too. The official report remained unchanged. Death by undetermined environmental causes. But those who had walked the search routes, who had heard the story of the voice on the recorder, believed there was something deeper. Some said Michael had found what he was always searching for, a truth hidden in the quiet spaces between the trees. Others thought the forest had called to him, not to harm him, but to keep him. A few months after the site was closed to the public, A wildlife camera placed nearby captured something unusual. At 3:17 a.m., a faint light appeared within the hollow tree, not fire, not lightning, but a soft glow, pulsing like breath. When rangers returned to investigate, they found nothing, only the lingering scent of rain and earth. The footage was later lost during data transfer, leaving behind yet another unanswered question. As the seasons turned, the story of Michael Turner faded from headlines but never from the hearts of those who knew him. To this day, hikers still leave small offerings, a pen, a notebook, a folded leaf at the base of the tree. And some claim that, if you stand there long enough, you can still hear the faint click of a recorder turning on, followed by a quiet voice, almost a sigh, carried through the stillness. Maybe it's just the wind. Or maybe, as Anna once wrote in her final letter, Michael never got lost. He simply went where the silence lives. If this story stayed with you, remember to subscribe to Last Seen, where we bring to light real-life mysteries, stories of loss, and the echoes left behind. Stay curious, stay safe. And when the forest grows quiet, listen closely. Some silences still speak.